Facebook has announced a $5 million package to help Australian news publishers better understand and use their social media platform.
So, for more on this, yourmoney.com.au editor Alex Bikovich joins us now. Alex, thanks for being with us here. Look, is this a bit of an olive branch to Australian publishers, given that they've just been raping and pillaging their content for all these years now?
Well, you know, I think Facebook would like everyone to think that it is. Certainly it is a bit of a change of strategy. And, you know, a lot of publishers out there are now putting money in Facebook's pocket in various initiatives and spending, you know, advertising and boosting their posts and so on. So it is nice to see the flow of funds going back the other way a little bit. Of course, Rupert Murdoch famously said in the last couple of years that these social giants should be paying the traditional media for all of the content that we freely provide on their platform. So Facebook in this instance hasn't quite gone the whole hog and done that. But nonetheless, I think, you know, the profession will be happy to take the $5 million.
Why have so many media organisations just given all their content for free to Facebook for so long?
Look, it's interesting, and this is something that Campbell Brown, who is Facebook's global head of news partnerships, talks about a lot. You know, when media companies criticise Facebook, and she's a former CNN anchor, she says, of course, you don't have to play on Facebook's playground, you know, and I think that media companies and strategists and inside the boardrooms of all the traditional media companies, no doubt this is a debate that they have, you know, do we want to play on their turf and help enrich them with our content? Are we friends or are we enemies, or are we indeed frenemies, which is probably closer to the truth. But I think that, you know, for Facebook, partly they see traditional media increasingly as a customer, as we've just said, and there is more sort of business-to-business ties going on, and that's quite a new thing. But that's not really what's going on here. I mean, in the scheme of who's advertising with Facebook, which is pretty much every business, you know, traditional media is still a very small part of the pie. This is much more, I think, about the social media giants, and Google's just done something similar, going on a PR offensive, because, of course, their fortunes have changed in the last couple of years, and the sort of media coverage that they get has changed and become a lot more negative.
Yeah, well, I suppose from a publisher's perspective, it is all about, you know, fishing where the fish are, and Facebook has billions of eyeballs every single day. But as you said there, it's all about PR, I guess, because the fake news thing, which has consumed the world, really, is based in a large part around Facebook. So is Facebook trying to, you know, I guess, excuse itself from all of that mess and invest in quality journalism? Is that what we're seeing?
Absolutely, and not just the fake news thing. I mean, they have been criticised, not as a manufacturer of fake news, but as perhaps not policing fake news, and not just Facebook, but Twitter as well. They've come under fire for, you know, not policing hate speech, and then at the other end of the spectrum, they've come under fire for, you know, for being too tough on freedom of speech when they do ban people from their networks. So there's been that whole crisis, and then, of course, there's been the more serious issue around privacy breaches and unethical use of customer data, which they've been hammered for in the media. So I do think that they are trying to get legitimacy with this, and they're trying to claw back some of that goodwill. And you have to keep in mind that these businesses, considering how big they are and how powerful they are, have until now had an enormous amount of goodwill. You know, people hand over really lucrative data over to them, give them the ability to read their private messages and give them enormous power. And until now, you know, they haven't really had that negative flow-on effect. So the other thing, of course, is it's not just the PR thing, but they're trying to ward off the regulators as well. In Europe, the regulators have been very tough on Google in particular. That's over competition matters, not so much these sort of speech issues. But even here, you know, the competition regulator, the ACCC, is looking at the social media giants and the impact that their business models have on the traditional media, and the impact that that has on flow of information and all of that.
And this actual accelerator program that they're going to be running here, do you think that it's going to be helpful? Do you think that Australian journalists are still in part mystified by Facebook?
Yeah, look, I think that it's certainly helpful. Partly, I think a lot of the businesses that have been in this space, some of them are not doing particularly well in terms of their commercial model. So I think any investment from a philanthropic sense is helpful. I also think media companies to varying degrees have learnt the lessons that have made the social media giants so successful. So some need to, still pick up a lot of these skills, and that's helpful. What's interesting is, if you have a look specifically at what they're doing here, though, they are focusing on investigative projects. Facebook is extending an olive branch, but it also has a very firm view on what it wants media companies that it does business with to look like. And if, the Walkley Foundation in particular, a lot of Walkley recipients are either public broadcasters like the ABC, or they are subscription-based models that are doing more long-form investigative stuff. So Facebook is happy to endorse that sort of model. It's not going around and handing out bags of gold to BuzzFeed and Junkie and the people that are more directly competitive and operating on a sort of clickbait or a cost-per-click basis. So I think, it's very telling which media providers the social giants are getting into bed with.
What can you do with $5 million? Like, how many people does that hire, and for how long? And, is this sort of a once-off kind of, look, what we're making an effort here, or is this kind of an ongoing commitment?
Well, if they've got a few secondments from Facebook HQ, some Harvard Business School grads, I don't think it'll buy much, maybe 1 or 2 salaries. But I think that, we'll see how this plays out in purpose. And they haven't just launched this accelerator program. They've also announced a sponsorship of the Walkley Awards more broadly, and a range of other initiatives. Interesting also, I suspect that, I can't speak on behalf of the Walkley Foundation, but I suspect that there was a conversation going on about whether or not to accept this money. We have to keep in mind that only a year ago, there were ethical investment houses that were dumping Facebook stock on ethical grounds, right? So, if a tobacco company came up to support the Walkleys, I reckon there'd be some serious conversations going on. Not to necessarily draw that parallel that Facebook's, of the same ilk, but I do think that, it's really interesting the way that the Walkley Foundation has responded to this warmly, and, it is a sign of a thawing of the ice.
Such interesting points, as always. I just want to ask, when we talk about investment in Australian journalism from, sources outside the sector, Judith Neilson dropped $100 million. $100 million on setting up a journalism institute. So how does the Facebook investment look in that light, do you think? Yeah,
interesting. And Judith Neilson is a very rich Australian, but in terms of the ratio of that investment to her net worth versus the $5 million that Facebook have given Aussie journalism versus what they're worth, Judith Neilson really is stumping up quite a lot here. And this is not her only philanthropic venture. Judith Neilson, of course, the former wife of Kerr Neilson, Platinum Asset Management, one of the most successful fund managers. Look, I think it's good to see that increasingly people are seeing investigative journalism as something worth investing in. It is quite new thinking about journalism as a philanthropic effort. There are a lot of causes that people can invest in that have wonderful impacts on society that, are arguably at the pointier end of the kind of NGO charitable works than journalism, and it's great that she's made this investment.
Somebody's got to tell their stories, Alex, or it's like they didn't happen.
That's right.
Journalism plays a vital role there.
Absolutely, and I think that Facebook has come to realise that as well. We are learning a lot from Facebook and good media companies like ours. We're relatively new, so we don't have a lot of these legacy fights and wars and that go on with the social giants. In fact, we're happy to partner with the social giants, and I would encourage all of your viewers to follow us, Your Money Oz, if they're not already. But I think as well the social giants are starting to learn stuff from the media providers who've been doing this for hundreds of years, because the traditional companies know that this is a thorny business. Providing information to people contains responsibility. They're used to all of the ethical issues that go along with that. And you wouldn't see many media companies, if any, worth their salt, flogging client data onto a third party for use in a political campaign. It's just not the way that media companies are wired. They might rent out that database to advertisers, of course, but that's a very, very different thing. And I think Facebook is now at a point where it's realising that, some of what the media has been through in its development is worth paying attention to.
It's so good to see the extent with which you're on top of this topic, Alex. Yeah, yourmoney.com.au is in some pretty safe hands there. Thank you very much, Alex Vikovich.
Thanks, Ross.